Hello and welcome to another video on the JJ Think Tank. I hope you're doing well today on this Easter Sunday. May we always remember the greatness of our Lord Jesus Christ. Today I want to talk about mental illness and whether we are misconstruing what mental illness is. By this question, I mean whether we are expanding the idea of mental illness in order to legitimize the psychiatric profession, and if so, if this is the case, whether this trend that is occurring is actually harming the average person, because he or she may actually not be mentally ill. They may think they are, and because of this they may go to a psychiatrist or a psychologist to try and find out, yes, whether there is something wrong with them. If we imagine a situation where they actually didn't go, perhaps after a while, without the intervention of a psychiatrist or a psychologist, they would heal, yes? Or they would realize all along that nothing was wrong with them. This is just a hypothetical situation that I'm creating now in my mind, yes? But what else do I want to say by posing this question? Well, I would say the very idea of mental illness. Well, who actually defines mental illness? What? Because there's always a relation, yes, between the person who is supposedly healthy and the person who is supposedly ill, yes? There's, we could say, a stereotype where those who are healthy follow certain patterns of behavior, certain codes of conduct, certain cultural norms, whereas other people who are labeled and defined as sick show different patterns of behavior, yes, and don't adapt to the culture or to the environment surrounding them. And in many cases, perhaps these people are actually the healthy ones, yes? Because when we think of, for example, the Soviet Union, during the times of the Soviet Union, those who refused to adapt to the new Soviet life and the laws and the rules of the Soviet era, they were labelled, yes, as sick, yes, mentally ill. So these questions, they really interest me, because being perhaps philosophically minded, I like to question presuppositions, I like to question certain labels, certain ideas, certain facts, or we could say, yes, terms, yes, that are agreed upon, the general consensus, yes. And this book by Thomas Szasz, a Hungarian, or perhaps even a Jewish Hungarian. I'm not sure at this moment in time. But yes, he goes into this in depth. And he presented an interesting view about psychology, about the psychiatric profession, and how it's kind of abusing its powers to expand its scope and to include more and more people into the definition and the group of people belonging to those that are mentally ill. Yes. And this quote really rang a bell. And it goes as follows. In the animal kingdom, the rule is eat or be eaten. In the human kingdom, define or be defined. And it made me think, yes, because when we allow others to define us, and we don't push back, we don't fight back, and if quite a lot of people do define us in this same way, after a while we think, oh, is there something wrong with me? Am I doing something wrong with my life? Am I not following the crowd? Am I not doing the thing that is required of me? Yes. So, for instance, am I not working? Yes. Am I not doing my 9 to 5? Am I not paying my taxes? Yes. Am I not fulfilling everything that is expected of me? Pursuing an education, and so forth. Yes, all these standard paths that we take in life, career paths. Yes. But then, when we think of this quote, we can also think of eccentrics. Yes, there are a lot of eccentrics out there. Many people will define them as crazy, mad. Others will see their genius. So, who in the end, who defines what mental illness is? Yes. In the past, we can think of many people who are labelled as mad, as out of touch with reality, but they were in fact onto something. Yes. When we think of a lot of great thinkers and artists in the past, a lot of these people, these great figures in history, were labelled as crazy, mad, yes, or mentally ill. But when we look back in hindsight, in retrospect, this supposed mental illness is what allowed them to, for example, perform these great creative acts or to achieve these great things that they did. Yes. But yes, let's go into my article now and unpick this book that I read. And as I said, and as I wrote down here, what is mental illness? Is there such a thing? Who defines it? Thomas Szasz, in his book, The Myth of Mental Illness, dives into these issues and explains the conspiracy of psychiatry to legitimize the idea of mental illness on an ever-increasing scale, expanding its scope to include a bewildering range of illnesses and supposed disorders. So this is true. There's so many new illnesses popping up, apparently, that people have. For instance, ADHD, bipolar, all these strange, not strange, but all these new illnesses. Depression, manic depression, schizophrenia, antisocial personality disorder, borderline, well, I already said borderline personality disorder, schizoid personality disorder, so forth, yes? So this DSM, this is like the manual of the psychologists. It keeps on expanding, yes? So many more definitions, so many more labels. Are these illnesses true? Are they real? You tell me, I don't know. So, where does Szasz pin down this expanding growth of psychology and how it keeps on creating new illnesses? Yes, he pins it down to Freud and Charcot, because early on, when the psychological profession, the role of the psychologist was being formed, there was this institutional game structure in early psychoanalysis, which legitimized the situation of patient and psychologist, in order for the patient to legitimize their illness and their way of life, but also for the psychologists to gain, some material wealth, yes, and also just to legitimize the profession itself, so that they felt good about themselves and to feel that they were doing something positive, yes, for society. But Szasz also wrote down and highlighted how many of the mental illnesses they encountered were actually the product of misapplied science. And later on we'll talk about these mental illnesses that were actually based on a misapplication of science. So the main object of study by Szasz is his analysis of hysteria. So this was the initial definition of mental illness back then. So hysteria included all mental illnesses. And at the time, Szasz argues that people who had this hysteria were actually either malingerers at worst, so people who knew they were not actually mentally ill, but using their mental illness to avoid responsibility and so forth, or at best unconscious liars. Of course, this is controversial. This is definitely a controversial statement, because it would mean that now many people who label themselves as mentally ill are in fact just twisters, liars, people who are lazy, who do not want to take action to change their lives, yes? I'll provide my own opinion at the end, but this is what I'll say for now. And as I just noted before, we already talked about this, but there was a semi-conscious game playing out between the analyst and the patient, the participant. So one played the role of the victim in order to receive preferential treatment, and the other to legitimize his profession. This was the main game, yes, that was playing out. There are, though, at times parts of the book where Szasz recognizes the benefits of psychoanalysis and talk therapy. Many people now in the world, they pay for therapy, for a personal therapist. And so there's no doubt that discussing your problems with an individual you trust, with a person you trust, even if it's a stranger in the form of a therapist, it definitely helps, yes, because you are able to perhaps clarify your situation through the eyes of another person, yes, because another third party can provide an objective view and an analysis of your situation, yes. Because if you're constantly stuck in your own mind, you keep rehearsing these negative thought patterns about your life, then they can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. But if you release this into an environment with a therapist, suddenly life may not be so overbearing, yes? But the key argument that I noticed in Szasz's book was how he views mental illnesses as being ethical, moral, or way of life issues rather than chemical, physical, or scientific ones. And to this day, we can see that the chemical, physical, or scientific view of mental illness has won. Because when people are mentally ill, when they have anxiety, depression, all these other mental illnesses, they are often prescribed various drugs, yes, to cure their mental illness. When in fact, their mental illness is a much more broad problem. It's a holistic problem. It's a whole way of life issue. It's not about just some certain dysregulation in the brain, chemical dysregulation in the brain. It's the life that people are leading, yes? The modern life, which is dull, monotonous in many cases, and yes, if a patient is unable to spice up their life, basically, then eventually they fall down into the trap of mental illness. And this is, as I said, this is what Szasz believes is to be the case. So psychiatry wants to present itself as a science by clinging to these rigid explanations and descriptors provided for by the scientific discipline. But this is exactly the reason for its own downfall, the author argues. And which continues to affect, yes, the psychiatric profession by reducing, yes, all mental illness to an organic physicochemical basis. But in the book, Szasz doesn't only criticize, yes, the profession, he also offers a way out. And he ultimately sees the problem of the hysteric and others that are mentally ill by showing how they're not playing or learning new games. And if the hysteric were able to play new games, then he or she would be able to escape their mental illness. And this was the best part of the book, right near the end, in my view. Szasz includes this in the final chapter, and in this part he refers to Pirandello's play, The Rules of the Game. And I'll read this part to you because it's definitely worth going over. And it goes as follows. Leon is one of the characters. Ah, Venanzi. It's a sad thing when one has learned every move in the game. And then Guido says, what game? Leon replies, why, this one, the whole game of life. Have you learned it? Yes, a long time ago. Leon's despair and resignation come from believing that there is such a thing as the game of life. Indeed, if mastery of the game of life were the problem of human existence, having achieved this task, what would there be left to do? But there is no game of life in the singular. The games are infinite. Modern man seems to be faced with a choice between two basic alternatives. On the one hand, he may elect to despair over the lost usefulness or the rapid deterioration of games painfully learned. Skills acquired by diligent effort may prove to be inadequate for the task at hand, almost as soon as one is ready to apply them. Many people cannot tolerate repeated disappointments of this kind. In desperation, they long for the security of stability, even if stability can be purchased only at the cost of personal enslavement. The other alternative is to rise to the challenge of the unceasing need to learn and relearn and try to meet this challenge successfully. So in essence, what Szasz is saying here, using, by referring to this play, the rules of the game, is that mental illness arises when people settle on their laurels. They have lost the mystery of life. They're not curious about life anymore. They're not learning new things. They're afraid of taking risk. They're afraid of appearing dumb or incompetent. But there's no need to have these feelings. Yes. It's better to take the risk and make a mistake, or make many mistakes, than not to try at all, right? Because along the way, at least we learn something about ourselves and we discover more about life and our personality, our character. And this was a brilliant presentation, I felt, of the problem of modern life and mental illness. Which is why I agree with Szasz to a degree that mental illness definitely isn't based just on brain structure and chemistry, yes, and the physico-chemical, yes, structure of the brain. Initially, perhaps, yes, there is a physiological basis to mental illness, because we can imagine an alcoholic. So if such a person keeps on drinking, then of course eventually he will be mentally ill. But if we think of the common person, the common man out there, common man or woman, it's more a problem, as Szasz argues, it's a way of life issue. They've stopped discovering new games in life, new things to do, yes, and therefore they're stuck. Yes. They've traded freedom for security, as Szasz wrote here. So as I just mentioned, I disagree with Szasz. I think in some severe cases of mental illness, there is a physico-chemical brain change or brain damage that's taken place in a person, which causes him or her to be, mentally ill, to have these erratic behaviors, and to lead a poor quality of life. But then at the same time, it's true that many cases, people, because they've been stuck in these loops, these thought loops for such a while, and because they now define themselves as mentally ill, they're in a way, they're trapped, and they don't realize that this mental illness, it's a creation of their own. Yes, and they are able to break out of this trap. But it takes some effort. Yes, it takes involves learning new things, trying new things out, new activities, new habits, new routines, and becoming more spontaneous in general. So I think that's the end. Yes, that's the end of my video for today. I've covered everything that I wanted to. I hope this video has shed some light on the topic of mental illness, and perhaps if you are struggling with mental illness, then this video may have helped you in that sense, because you may have now realized that to a degree mental illness is a creation of your own that doesn't really well exist in the traditional sense. In the next video I want to go a bit more into this topic, but from another angle, using and applying game theory. So I'll save this paragraph for the next video because I think it's relevant. But yes, in the meantime, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And I hope to see you on the next one. Thank you for listening.